What's going on, guys? Marco here with Dynasty Nerds, and I am bringing you my start-sit wide receivers for Week 7. Before we jump into anything, I want to remind you to subscribe to this YouTube channel. Use the link in the description below to get 15% off joining the Nerd Herd, which gives you access to the GM tool, different analysts' rankings, an extra podcast episode, tons of content, tons of extra content specific to just the Nerd Herd. So you want to make sure you get 15% off using the link below or promo code 14P, that's the number 14P at sign out, and you'll get that 15% off. Also, follow me on Twitter at Marco_14P. I'll answer as many questions that you guys have, whether it be fantasy or dynasty or redraft related, in the comments below, but I'll get to the questions for sure faster. If you hit me up on Twitter, my DMs are always open. I'll just see those notifications faster. So let's jump into it. Let's start with my starts for Week 7 at the wide receiver position. I've got two of them. The first one is Brandon Aiyuk. Now, Brandon Aiyuk has shown that he is a very talented playmaker. He's shown he's a very good wide receiver, and he's starting to get more and more involved in this offense. Last week, he had a great game, and in Week 7, he plays the Kansas City Chiefs, which means that as much as the 49ers would like to run the ball, do all these different creative things, which are great, they're going to have to throw the ball against this Kansas City defense. And last week, Jimmy Garoppolo threw the ball a bunch. I think he's going to continue in Week 7. Brandon Aiyuk probably finds the end zone in this one. I think he's that talented. His yak ability is incredible. Not quite Deebo Samuel-esque, but he's more of a pure wide receiver to me. So I really love both of ththese guys in Kansas City, but Brandon Aiyuk's one of those guys who you're never really sure. Should I put him in? Should I not? Especially with bye weeks happening this week, Brandon Aiyuk is a lineup lock for me in Week 7. The next guy that I'm starting in Week 7 is Diontae Johnson, the perpetually underrated Diontae Johnson. You know, when Kenny Pickett first got on the field, his go-to guy was George Pickens. And while George Pickens is definitely seeing plenty of targets, so is Diontae Johnson. A lot of people don't really like that headline. They want to see George Pickens. They want to see that crazy catch he had. And they can do those things because the reality is George Pickens is a phenomenal player. I think he's a long-term wide receiver one. I've been saying it since, before the draft even. He was one of my favorite rookies in this class at the wide receiver position. That being said, Diontae Johnson is a very, very good wide receiver. He does all of the technical things really, really well. He's still being peppered with targets, even in an offense where George Pickens is starting to emerge. Right now, you can probably get him in your dynasty and redraft leagues for really, really cheap. If you got questions about that, drop them below. Hit me up on Twitter. Happy to answer all of those. But Diontae Johnson against a Miami team that is still very prolific, Tua or not, I think he's going to have to be one of the safety nets, one of the staples of this offense in this game. Tua, it might be back in Week 7, which makes it even more likely that the Pittsburgh Steelers lean on these wide receivers instead of Najee Harris, who has just been inefficient, even with the steel plate out of his shoe last week, which I thought was going to help him, and it did not. What you're going to want to do is, I'm okay firing up Diontae Johnson as a wide receiver 2 with upside. I think George Pickens is a flex with upside in this one. They've got a little bit of a tougher secondary with this Miami Dolphins team, but I think both these guys are viable options in Week 7, especially with, again, like I've talked about in a bunch of videos this week, just the bye weeks that hit. They're a little bit brutal on a lot of our lineups. So Diontae Johnson, Brandon Aiyuk are guys I love starting in Week 7. I've got 2 fades, sits, however you want to talk about them. Technically 3, I guess. But I'm going to start with the wide receiver group of the Denver Broncos. We don't know if Russ is going to be on the field for Week 7, but we do know that the New York Jets defense has actually been much improved. A lot of people were expecting this. It was a team that I thought was going to surprise a lot of people, and while their offense is still figuring out the hiccups, their defense is insanely talented, even if they've got some veterans who aren't always healthy. Sauce Gardner is the real deal. He's probably a top 5 cornerback in the league in his rookie season. So we don't know exactly if he's going to be on Courtland Sutton, if he's going to be on Jerry Jeudy. He might shadow, he might not. But whoever he covers is completely locked down basically this whole game, especially if they roll out a backup quarterback. I'm not trusting Sutton or Jeudy in Week 7 against the Jets. It's just not a matchup that you can capitalize on like you used to be able to. And they have so many questions about what is happening with this offense, whether Russ is on the field or not. I'm putting both of these guys on my bench if I have the ability to. Of course, I've already talked about it in this video. There's bye weeks, so Sutton and Jeudy might be able to provide you some flex numbers in a full PPR league, but in half PPR and standard, they're probably not giving you much. I don't know if either of these guys gets into the end zone. I think the Jets win this one pretty handily, which is just crazy to say out loud because this is a Broncos team people were pumped about in the offseason, but Russ has not been as advertised, and I am sitting both of these guys, Russ or not, in week 7 if my lineup can allow me to do that. The other guy I want to sit this week, and you might be thinking, well, why would I start him anyway? But the reality is Jakobi Meyers has been very involved, especially in full PPR leagues. He's been a really solid player, and he's had some ups and downs, but ultimately he's given you 10-plus points almost every single week. Now, Jakobi Meyers plays a Chicago Bears defense that on paper is very, very beatable. You know, the Chicago Bears probably won't win this game against the New England Patriots, but one of the, or I should say probably the only good part about this Bears team right now is their secondary. Their secondary has a lot of young pieces, a lot of nice pieces. Jeudy Johnson will be on the field. Kyler Gordon is starting to improve. Jaquan Brisker at safety is pretty incredible as well. I don't know if the Patriots are really going to be able to pass too much on the Chicago Bears. And I know that seems kind of crazy, whether it's Bailey Zappi, Mac Jones, or whoever is back there at quarterback for New England. They might have to lean more on Ramondre Stevenson in this one than they have in the past, and they're already leaning on him quite a bit. So even in PPR leagues, I think Jakobi Meyers, even though he might be projected for, top 15, top 20 wide receiver numbers, he might flirt with that, but I would temper expectations. You have to put him in your lineup. Just don't expect more than like 12, maybe 15 at the absolute most, which is fine for a bye week, but he's playing a defense that is a lot tougher in the secondary than just the numbers would really tell you. And so this is just a matchup that I'm kind of straying away from for Jakobi Meyers. And I don't know if you're going to really hear that in a lot of other places, but as someone who is a Bears fan, who understands a lot of the weaknesses and strengths of this team, the secondary is just not one that I really want to mess with, especially with a guy who's got a lot of talent, but he's not really an elite player. Okay, guys, well, that is it for me for my wide receiver start sits. If you've got specific questions about your roster, start sits, trades, whatever, drop them in the comments below. Hit me up on Twitter at Marco_14P. I'm happy to get to any and all questions that I can. Don't forget to be kind, do good, and I'll see you next time. Peace.